Welcome to Networking RX, a podcast devoted to helping business professionals like you enhance your networking skills in order to become more proficient giving and receiving quality business referrals and improving the overall quality of your life and the lives of those around you. The Networking RX podcast is a production of AmSpirit Business Connections, an organization whose mission is to empower business success through networking.
When I was in college, I was part of I played football. I was in a fraternity, and most of the guys in the fraternity were football players, and a lot of testosterone, a lot of, just a lot of yelling, certainly fighting from time to time. And, you kind of knew where you stood with people. And I don't want to be sexist about it, but maybe that's sort of a guy thing. I remember going to a 10-year high school reunion and talking to a woman I went to school with, and she was angry at another woman. I'm like, well, what happened? Well, back in when we were juniors, something happened. I'm like, oh my gosh, that was 11 years ago. Let it go. Again, I don't want this to be terribly sexist. I'm sure there are guys out there that hold a grudge like that. But to an extent, I think, the people I have hung around with, I'll speak for myself. I'm a sample size of one. For the most part, there are people out there that I hung out with in college and even in law school that I could get a good bead on where their emotions were at. But that's not always the case. And I think it's, we want to understand other people's mindsets and attitudes, certainly towards us, towards the situations we're in and life in general. And so that sort of begs the question of what's the best way to understand people's emotions. And I came across a study that I thought was very interesting. Actually, it was a series of studies looking at how we read people's emotions and, what is the best way to read somebody's emotion? Is it in their face? Quite possibly could be. Maybe it's in their eyes. Maybe it's how they, how they hold their mouth. I mean, there are people out there who they kind of force a smile, and you can kind of tell they're forcing a smile. And I'm not an expert on it, but you start to read about these things from people who are experts, and they'll say they can see these micro expressions on people's face with respect to how they're feeling. And how they're feeling, what their emotion is. I'm not an expert on it, but you would think that would be the best way to read somebody's emotion. But according to these studies, it's not the best way to read people's emotions. In fact, the best way to read people's emotions is not on their face at all. And so what they did in a series of studies is they showed people's faces, showed them talking, showed them interacting, and allowed people to see those faces. And then that was one group. And then another group, what they did was they showed people's faces and they had the audio going as well. So you could hear what the person was saying. And then the third group, all they got was the audio. Well, it turns out, and this study has been done over and over and over again, and the results are pretty consistent, is that the people who are the listeners only, meaning they don't have a face to look at, all they have is an audio to go with, are better at reading people's emotions. You would think the middle one would be. I mean, the reason reading faces aren't effective is that people do a relatively good job of hiding their emotions. I mean, I'm not an expert at knowing when somebody's giving me just a fake smile or it's a genuine smile. And I think the smile isn't, it's certainly in the lips, but it's also in the eyes, and certain things don't happen in the eyes when it's a fake smile. Again, I'm not an expert, so I point to it and say, aha, that's a fake smile. But I might just know subconsciously, okay, yeah, something's off with that smile, but I couldn't place it, right? They smiled. So, okay, I'm kind of going through a logical, conscious sort of reasoning as to what their state of mind is. And so people do a relatively good job of hiding their emotions with respect to their face. But when you get the face and the audio, you would think that that would be the most powerful, that would be the best for interpreting where people are, what people's attitudes are, what their mindset is, where their emotions are at. And it turns out it's not. And the theory is, and they're working through all sorts of testing on this, but the theory is is that when we're looking at somebody's face and we're listening to their voice, we're getting almost too much information. And it's possible to get too much information. I mean, think about it. You took high school chemistry, and it probably went at a decent pace, right? You could, okay, I can get a B high school chemistry, just kind of going along. It's going fast, but I can kind of keep up. You get to a college chemistry course, even though you're covering the same material, it's going so fast. And in a semester or one quarter, you're going to cover a whole year's worth of chemistry, and then move on to whatever organic chemistry or whatever else. And that's because so much information is coming at you. It's really difficult, and really only the best of the best can kind of keep up with it. Hence, I don't have a chemistry degree. But it's the same sort of the thing. When you get so much information coming at you, that you really don't do a good job of understanding any of it. So you're trying to understand somebody's words and what they mean with respect to those words. And at the same time, you're getting information from their face, trying to look at, okay, what's happening with their eyes, what's happening with their mouth. Are they looking me in the eye? Whatever it might be. And it's hard to kind of keep track of all that stuff going on. And, you end up doing a poor job of it. And so it really, that middle one of having the audio and the facial it's too much information for us to really sort through. But the third one, the audio only, that tends to be the most successful of all the ways to read someone's emotion, is just to look at, or just to listen to what they have to say. And when you're just listening to what people have to say, things are coming at you, they're potentially coming at you fast, but not nearly as fast as, when you're just looking at somebody's facial expressions. It's like, okay, what did I just see? And by the time you're trying to process that, you're on to another facial expression. And so you kind of get behind the eight ball, if you will. But when we're listening to people speak, we can stop and we can listen for how things are said and what things are said. It's just coming at it's at a pace where our mind can really sort of absorb what's being said, and well, certainly the context matters. But we're just, the studies show that we're just better able to understand what people are saying. There's some numbers here, the number of people who were involved in this study. It was a series of experiments involving over 1,800 people. That's a pretty significant sample size, 1,800 people, a series of experimentations. And a lot of these experiments that I talk about, these are university based, somewhere around the world, a reputable university, and they're peer reviewed, meaning a group of scientists, social scientists, are looking at a study, and they're asking challenging questions. Have we controlled for this? Have we controlled for that? And many of these studies are done by doctoral candidates, people looking to get their PhD, and as part of that, they need to be getting a body of research and getting things ready to be published. And a lot of these things don't get reported upon unless they're published. So there's a fair degree of vetting. This is not just some crackpot professor at no-name university just doing some little study. These are studies that probably have been published. They've been reviewed, they've been published, and duplicated time and again. So, the point to this is, if you really want to develop relationships with people, personal and business, it's really down to stopping and listening. And I think that's something I need to do a better job of. I am a work in progress in a lot of things, and I think that's something I need to do a better job of just kind of shutting up and letting people go, and and listening to what they have to say. I know I need to do a better job, certainly with my wife. I need to do a better job with respect to the people in AmSpirit Business Connections. It's just, again, I'm a work in progress, but what this article is telling me, and hopefully telling you, is I can be much more effective in understanding where people are coming from, by just being quiet and listening. And they have something they want to say, and their words are going to be speaking volumes. So get into a conversation this week, talk to an employee or a vendor or prospective client or a current client. Just stop and listen. Just stop and listen to what they have to say, and you'll get a better sense as to where they're coming from and what they mean with respect to whatever it is they're trying to communicate.
Thanks for joining us on the Networking RX podcast. Please put what you've learned into action today and let us know if you have questions, comments, or ideas for future topics. You can email them to us at podcast@amspirit.com. That's AmSpirit.com. Finally, so you never miss an episode, be sure to subscribe to the Networking RX podcast through iTunes, Overcast, or however you receive your podcasts. Now get out and network with someone.
The Networking RX podcast is the copyright production of AmSpirit Business Connection. All rights reserved.